Well, thank you so much again, Mr. Vice President, for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to get to speak with you.
It's an honor to be with you.
You have been fighting violence against women for decades,
Yes.
and your current initiative, It's On Us, asks students and their peers to step forward and speak out when they see behavior or interactions that could be dangerous. Why is this your current approach to campus sexual assault?
Well, you know, when I wrote the Violence Against Women Act 22 years ago, we actually had great success. Violence against women has come down 67%, more people are reporting. But I had a woman who helped me write that, a woman named Cynthia Hogan, a great lawyer. She's now with the NFL since that halfback grabbed his wife out of an elevator by the hair. And they decided they got to get in the game, no pun intended. And I said, and I brought, the president allowed me to bring the Violence Against Women office inside the vice president's office with the support and help of the attorney general. And so I said, let's find out what's going on. And she went over, and the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which keeps crime rates, she came back with a devastating piece of information. Women between the ages of 14 and 24, we've made no progress. 1 in 4 on college campuses are being raped back then or assaulted the same way now. And so that's when I decided we had to change things. And what I did was, I did the virtual town meetings with a lot of colleges as students, as well as high school students. And I asked a question. I said, if we could do anything to change the circumstances on campus, what would it be? I expected them to say more lighting in parking garages, more campus cops. You know what the number one thing was? Get men involved. And that's when it started. And that's when I went to the president. We agreed we'd start this program called It's On Us. In the meantime, what we've done is we've gotten hundreds of celebrities and athletes and movie actors and to get engaged and saying one's too many. When I just did the NAACP, I'm so associated with the NAACP, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, in the Sweet 16, and I went down for the Final Four and was interviewed by all the announcers there who wanted to talk about the message to send out to college students. So I'm convinced if we keep this up, we can begin to change the culture on campuses so that women are no longer blamed. You know, one of the saddest things I learned holding those hearings was that women tend to blame other women who are raped. Women tend to hold themselves, ask the question, what did I do? There's never a circumstance where a woman's assaulted, never where it's her fault. The only time a man ever has a right to raise his hand to a woman is in self-defense, period. But this culture of ours is upside down. We got to change it. Just as we've begun to change the culture, your generation, the millennials, have changed the culture on LGBT issues. You've literally changed the culture, and rapidly. We can do the same thing, where a woman no longer asks the question, what did I do? Or no judge or prosecutor ever says, what were you wearing? Did you have on a bra? It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
So I actually just graduated from college, not even a year ago. And that statistic you mentioned, that 1 in 4 women will be assaulted during their time there, always sticks with me. But also that only 6% of college presidents right now acknowledge that rape is an issue on their campus.
That's right.
How do you react to that, and what do you think explains that disconnect?
The disconnect is they know it's happening, but they're afraid it will hurt the reputation of their institutions, their competitive advantage. And that's why Arne Duncan, the former Secretary of Education, came to the president and said, I got an idea. Let's use Title IX. All those colleges get hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid. There's now 117 major institutions under investigation for not taking it seriously. I'm about to call another meeting to have college presidents come back to Washington, tell me what they're doing. Actually challenge them not to show up. It's their responsibility. They have an obligation. And it's a little bit like I said today, and I know I'm going to get criticized for saying this. A corporation that doesn't want to let it be known that they allow a toxin to seep into the water supply. This is a toxin on college campuses. Universities can do something about it. They can have on campus rape counselors. They can have on campus circumstances to help people. They can put together an environment where a woman has a chance to come and say what happened to her, let her make the choice what she wants to do, but give her guidance and counseling in the process. But they don't. And the reason is, what happens if at XYZ University they find out that, there are X number of women assaulted every year on the campus? It's immoral. It's wrong. They have an obligation.
So some critics of It's on Us actually feel that, as it is, the campaign doesn't do enough to call out rape culture and ask for that cultural change. That relying on bystanders, won't lead to that institutional disruption. What do you say to that?
Well, I say the institutional disruption is the cultural problem. The cultural problem is, it's like when I wrote the Violence Against Women Act, no organization would support it. Not one women's organization, nobody. It took years to get it moving. You know why? Well, everybody knew this dirty little secret was going on. But it was inherent in our culture. Look, the first woman I interviewed I knew I had to sort of pull the mask back on this dirty little secret. And there was a lovely woman named Marla Hanson, a model in New York City. She had an efficiency. She wanted a one-bedroom apartment. She lived in an upscale apartment complex. The landlord kept hitting on her, so she was going to leave. She got a phone call on location saying that she wanted to, he said, look, if you meet me in the restaurant bar in the building where she lived, I'll sign a contract for a one-bedroom. So she showed up. He hit on her again. She got up and left. The coward hired two thugs. They walked out and they slashed her face with razors. I asked her, what'd your mother say? She said, why were you in a bar? What'd your girlfriend say? Were you wearing a bra? How short was your skirt? That's a sick culture. You know where the phrase rule of thumb comes from? In the late 1300s, common law in England, a woman was a chattel, a piece of property like cattle. But so many women were being beaten to death by their husband. The English common law court said a husband can no longer beat his wife with a rod more bigger than the circumference of his thumb. It's part of our culture.
So you mentioned the story of Marla, and I'm curious if there's another specific story that maybe stands out to you that maybe transformed the way you look at this issue or guided the way that you set up It's on Us.
Well, there is one. There was a lovely young woman who became an advocate. By the time she testified, she'd been an advocate for 4 years. She went to a small college, a Catholic school just north of the University of Pittsburgh. And it was during her orientation period. And the last day of orientation before school began on Monday, there was a big bonfire because they didn't play football, but they had a soccer team. And she went to the bonfire with all her friends, to cheer on the team. And a young man who was an upperclassman, I don't know what year he was, who dated a friend of hers back home, said, I'll walk you back to your dorm. He said, but I got to stop at my dorm to get a coat. She stopped with him. He pulled her in the room, and he raped her. And I'll never forget what she said. She said she ran back to her dorm, ran upstairs, took all her clothes off, and went in the bathroom and took sticks in my mind, a scalding shower was her phrase. She said, I put a towel around me, I sit in the end of my bed in my room. My resident advisor came in and said, what happened? She said, I told her. And she looked at me and said, you've been raped. And I looked back at her and said, no, I wasn't. I knew him. Where the hell's that come from? No, I wasn't. I knew him. The way to change the culture is the same way we change the culture for the LGBT, the same way we change the culture. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even the city of Washington or out here, a group of businessmen could be sitting down having lunch, and a gay waiter come up with a lisp, and one of the wise guys say, well, I'll tell you what I'll have. Everyone would remain quiet because they thought they didn't want to. Today, they'd say, what the hell are you doing, man? Leave. That's how you change the culture. It is never, never, never the women's fault. And I get asked, how will I know when there's a success? There will be success when not a single woman who's been abused ever asks herself, what did I do?
Some advocates have said that a quick way that we could start making some concrete changes in culture would be to consider banning fraternities where a disproportionate number of these assaults occur. Do you think that in order to put an end to rape culture, that we need to consider banning fraternities or other single-sex organizations?
No, but here's what we have to do. The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department is investigating now patterns and practices of abuse, the civil rights cause of action. If fraternities engage in that, yes, they should be banned. Not all fraternities do that. Any school that's engaged in a pattern and practice of allowing sexual assault to take place, turning a blind eye, should be held accountable under the civil rights laws of the country.
Well, let's take Harvard, for example, where I went to school. 47% of the women in my graduating class who interacted with single-sex social organizations reported by the time that they graduated they'd been sexually assaulted. Do you think that that indicates a specific and localized crisis?
Well, I think it indicates that there's a real problem at Harvard, and it's a responsibility of the president of Harvard University and the administration to go in and investigate it, and if it's occurring and they can show that, get rid of the campus, get rid of those fraternities on campus that are engaged in it.
So let's shift gears to look at some of the other recent issues that some people are saying contributes to a culture that disrespects women. Just the other day, Donald Trump and his campaign tried to discredit a reporter who said that she'd been assaulted. He has made fun of Megyn Kelly, Carly Fiorina, Heidi Cruz. What does it say about us when the Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump, speaks about women so regularly in this way?
I'll tell you what it says about Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump, it matters what people say. It matters what your leaders say. It matters. Words matter. And the public should hold him accountable and how they vote. He could be a Democrat. He could be a liberal Democrat and say it. He should be held accountable by voting no. It matters what people say. It matters what they do. Their conduct matters. That sends a message to tens of thousands of young men and women. I think it's appropriate to do that, to say that.
Well, to be fair, Donald Trump isn't the only person who's said some divisive things
he
about
hasn't.
women lately. Senator Bernie Sanders actually just said that Hillary Clinton isn't qualified to be president.
That's totally different. Look,
Some are saying, though, that that's a sexist remark.
Well, look, they're both totally qualified to be president. They both get in a fight, campaigns to do that. It's like saying, she's dead wrong, or her saying he's dead wrong on an issue. You cannot argue that if he said she's not qualified because she's a woman, she's not qualified because...
Well, do you think she's held to a higher standard because she is a woman?
I don't think she's held to a higher standard. And this country's ready for a woman. There's no problem. We're going to be able to elect a woman in this country.
Would you like to see us elect a woman?
I would like to see a woman elected.
Correct.
That's it.
No, that's all right. No, I'd like to see. No, I don't mind any problem. I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting.
I'd like to ask one more question.
The president and I are not going to endorse because we both, when we ran, said, let the party decide. But gosh almighty, they're both qualified. He was overwhelmingly qualified to be president.
My last question for you, Mr. Vice President. When you announced in the Rose Garden that you would not be running for president, you mentioned that you and your family would continue to fight on a number of issues pertaining to the dignity of the American people. How are you going to continue the fight against sexual assault?
Well, I'm going to stay engaged in this fully, whether I set up an independent foundation, whether I work through some universities that have talked to me, or an independent foundation. I'm going to stay engaged. This has been the passion of my career. I've done a lot of other things in my career. But, when I first started speaking on this, no one wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. It's the single most important thing that I can do domestically. And I'm going to continue as long as I have a breath in me. And no matter what you think, no one ever doubts I mean what I say. Sometimes I say all that I mean, but I never say anything I don't mean. I'll be involved in this until I take my last breath because there's too many beautiful, bright, decent, honorable young men and women who are being victimized. And people are turning a blind eye. They're turning a blind eye. We have an obligation. We're going to be judges of culture as much on how we treat this issue as anything else that happens to us 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. And that's why I'm doing it internationally. I wrote an International Violence Against Women Act. That's why the President and I are making conditional what kind of aid we give based on whether or not the country allows genital mutilation, honor killings. There is no justification at all, cultural, religious, or otherwise, for denying a man or woman their basic human rights. So as long as I have a breath, I'm not changing since I was 22 years old. Nothing's changing.
Thank you so much for your time
Thank
today,
you.
Mr. Vice President.
Thank
I
you.
so appreciate it.
Thank you.